All right, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Garrett Schmidt, and I am the managing editor for ACO Exhibit Hall. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar hosted by Salient Healthcare, titled Managing Performance Across Payers, Getting Different Populations on the Same Page. And I'm really excited about this topic. I think there's going to be a lot of great stuff in here for all of you. A few items of note, some housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees have joined the webinar today in listen-only mode, so you don't need to worry about muting your mic or anything. That's been done for you. I would also like to let you know that the webinar is being recorded, so you'll have the opportunity to rewatch the session and or share it with colleagues after the fact. And we hope that you do so. And I'm going to send out a link to everyone that's registered later on this evening, and that will be a link to the recording and also a place where you can download the slides. And finally, during the webinar, we want to hear from you, so please submit your questions. There is a presenter control panel, or I'm sorry, an attendee control panel that has a question feature on it that you can ask questions there. And we're going to get to as many of those as we possibly can at the end, and there's going to be a Q&A session, but you don't have to wait till the Q&A session to submit questions. You can do that anytime. And these are also being recorded, so if we're not able to get to your question during the presentation, we'll definitely have someone follow up via email to answer it afterwards. So without further ado, wanted to present or let you know who our presenters are today. And we have Mr. Ryan Mackman, who's business consultant with Salient, and Miss Maria Nicole, who is senior business consultant also with Salient Healthcare, and Miss Lacey Waddles, who's population health informatics analyst at Rocky Mountain Accountable Health Network in Billings, Montana. And as a note, Ryan and Maria are also presenting today on behalf of Dan Bailey, who's the Vice President of Payer Contracting and Finance for ProHealth Solutions ACO, which is a next-gen ACO just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was unfortunately unable to attend, but was integral in helping put this presentation together. So just wanted to let you know about that. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to get us started. So welcome, Ryan.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. And hello, everybody. I'm Ryan Mackman. As Garrett said, I'm a business consultant with Salient Healthcare, and I'm really excited to present here via ACO Exhibit Hall. I hope that you'll both enjoy and find a lot of value in what we're talking about today. So managing performance across payers was put together because we know that as organizations take on more value-based contracts, we understand how difficult it is to manage each of those contractual and data variances. The Salient Healthcare team has been successful in integrating all of that data into our multi-payer solution. And today we want to share with you how we've gone about doing that. Both Dan and Lacey have engaged in multi-payer contracts, and they've successfully navigated a lot of the challenges that most organizations have either faced or are eventually going to face. So how this is going to work, Maria and I are going to set the stage, and then we're going to hand things off to Lacey for her use case, which will then be followed by Maria and I presenting Dan Bailey's use case in an interview format where I'm going to ask the questions, and then Maria will answer on ProHealth Solution ACO's behalf. So since 2012, there's been a lot of organizations that have embarked on their very first value-based care contract. And in a lot of cases, they've learned a lot along the way. At this stage, many organizations have either added or they're considering adding other contracts as they gain more experience in value-based care. The challenge, however, is that when you have many contracts, each with its own rules, its own regulations, nuances, you end up having to account for so many variances that scalability becomes a real problem. You've also got different data sources depending on whether your contract is with Medicare, Medicare Advantage, commercial insurance, Medicaid, etc. You're adding more data complexity, and that also means it's a lot harder to monitor your performance. In talking about data complexity, or variance for that matter, I'm going to go ahead and break this apart into smaller chunks to discuss where data variances are likely to occur. So first, attribution logic is a big one. You've got prospective and prospective with retrospective reconciliation. Regardless of which you choose, managing that data can be difficult when you've got several contracts, all of which might follow different attribution methodologies. Second, you have your risk score logic. Now, some contracts use CMS's hierarchical condition category. Other contracts might use the Johns Hopkins model or the diagnostic cost grouper. If you can't easily view that information in one place, then at some point, you're going to be stuck downloading all that data onto multiple Excel spreadsheets and then trying to make sense of that data, which is kind of like trying to measure something in both the metric system and the American standard system at the same time. It kind of doesn't work together so well. Third, you have quality metrics. Now, depending on your contract and your population, your quality metrics can be very different. Quality metrics for women and quality metrics for men aren't the same to begin with. Then factor in different ages and then different contracts, and you can see how quickly everything gets muddled and complicated. Timing is its own challenge. First, you have to deal with different attribution logic and different risk score logic combined with different quality metrics. And then all that information is going to trickle in at different times depending on the payer. So you could have more than 12 downloads in a given month. Moving on to general data fields, unfortunately, not all data comes in the exact same way. You have to design templates to fill in a lot of basic data fields so that you can then do proper calculations. And without that, you really don't have a complete data set. Finally, the sheer amount of data available is extremely variable. In both Rocky Mountain and ProHealth Solutions cases, they also look at their Medicare Advantage populations. Well, if you're going to get an apples to apples comparison of MA against MSSP, then you need to have the same data and the same amount of data coming in. But unfortunately, most Medicare Advantage payers don't provide information in the same format that CMS is going to provide for its Medicare beneficiaries, which means someone's got to go back and then fill in all those gaps. Now that we've looked at all the challenges with the different data variances, I'm going to briefly cover the data systems themselves. Now, if you think about your typical healthcare organization, you're likely to have anywhere from 1 to 3 EMRs. And then due to mass consolidations and acquisitions, you might have larger healthcare systems with 8 or 9 EMRs. In each case, there's an individual process to access data in each EMR. Then you've got different systems that are required to access each payer's data. So for instance, you can download CMS's data directly through their portal. But if you have multiple MA contracts on top of that, then you've just added a few more portals that you need to regularly access so that you can gather all of that data. Finally, some data sources are only accessible through other data systems. As an example of that, you've got your health information exchanges, which are different in every single state, and that's just the beginning. So what I'm going to do is dive into a lot of the available data sources over the next few slides. So here are 11 of the CMS data sources that Salient regularly accesses and brings into our system. I could sit here and read them off, but these slides are actually going to be downloadable at the end of the presentation, and I want to leave some more time for the use cases. On this next slide, we have other data sources, which include some from your multi-payer contracts. There's the HIE I just mentioned. Again, remember, there's different access points to all of these. So streamlined is probably the last word I would use to describe any of this. We've gone through a few layers of the data itself, its sources. Now we've got to look at the individual contracts to complete the puzzle. Each contract is slightly different, or in some cases, significantly different. As I mentioned before, you may have Medicare, Medicare Advantage, commercial, Medicaid contracts. Each of those are going to make you adhere to different quality metrics, attribution logic, and risk score logic. Additionally, they might measure your success in different terms. So in some, you might have a minimum savings rate and a minimum loss rate, while others don't have that stipulation at all. Then with network management, some contracts require you to have preferred providers, some don't. Once you have all this data, now you've got to manage each population by the rules and regulations of its individual contract. Okay. At this point, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking this is way more complicated than it should be. So how do we simplify everything? you need a single solution that can aggregate all of that data from all of the different sources and then normalize it so you can get an accurate depiction of your different populations, no matter where you're located and no matter what contracts you have. As you can see, it's not easy to do. And to this point, very few solutions have been able to pull this off both timely and successfully. And that's what Salient does. What I'm going to do now is hand this off to Maria, and she's going to talk about how we're able to get that done.
Thanks, Ryan. So your organization will receive numerous files, typically throughout the month, and it's easy to get confused if all that data is not centrally located. Salient manages and maintains the data in one location, and we run timely, continuous data loads for our clients. Salient uses the templating layer, for which the Medicare ACO data is the gold standard. Medicare provides this data in a standardized fashion on a monthly basis. Commercial payers will only provide about 70 to 90% of the same data, and then also include some additional fields. We identify the overlapping fields and then use them in the same fashion. Next, we will identify any missing data fields in the overall template. In this step, we may identify if the other data fields can bridge that gap, or if that requires developing proprietary logic to accomplish that goal. Finally, we add in those new data fields. The new payer becomes part of the overall schema, and that template can now be used for future clients. The template layer provides a systematic method of displaying the data in an apples-to-apples fashion. There's certainly many advantages that our clients derive as a result of the Salient process. First, all of the data is housed in a singular location, which means that there's no need to log into the disparate systems or even spreadsheets. Second, it's really easy to compare performance across payers. So for example, you can identify in a single scorecard how your organization is performing across all KPIs, across all contracts, in order to identify areas of opportunity. And third, many times our clients will receive static reports from various payers. This allows you to validate that information. Given our expertise in the industry, we're able to add new payer data within 8 to 10 weeks. And with payers that we're already familiar with, that turnaround time drops to just about 6 weeks. And then Medicare ACO data can be added to the solution in just under 2 weeks. All right, so now let's take a look at the key performance indicators that we recommend value-based organizations monitor across all of their contracts. There are 5 main categories that have to be satisfied for value-based organizations to finish with a spend that's below the benchmark, exceed the minimum savings rate, and hopefully attain shared savings. Those categories are finance, risk, attribution, quality, and utilization. For finance, one of the key metrics to track is the spend PMPY versus the benchmark. This will tell you whether you're on track for shared savings. With regard to risk, it's really important to keep an eye on your population's risk score, both at the organizational level and at the practice and provider level. Appropriate coding leads to a more accurate benchmark, and that enables you to anticipate the actual cost of care and the type of care that your population requires. This is the only way that payers know how sick your patients are, and then gives you credit for all of that hard work that you're doing. Now we're going to move on to attribution. We recommend looking at 2 attribution metrics, the percent continuously attributed and the percent of beneficiaries seen per quarter for primary care services. Based on our experience, those beneficiaries that have continuous assignment typically have a much lower spend. This is likely because they're getting the right care at the right time. Working our way over to quality, we recommend that value-based organizations monitor their annual wellness visit completion rate. This KPI literally impacts all of the other 5 categories. Your organization ultimately benefits as every single quality metric improves. AWVs reimburse at a higher rate than the E&M visit, and they help to develop a better patient-physician relationship. So this brings us back to utilization. First, we look at the TCM percent completed, since completing TCMs can significantly impact unnecessary readmissions. We also look at the visits per 1,000 for acute and post-acute care and the 30, 90, and 180-day readmission rates. So this gives you a complete look at the KPIs that are available in the Salient dashboards that Ryan will demo soon. And depending on your contract, it may be helpful to implement initiatives around network management and working with your assignable population. In network management, organizations may want to work on creating preferred provider networks by identifying specialists that are high value. Your organization will want to track whether patients are truly seeing preferred providers or whether out-of-network providers are being utilized. If your organization is engaged in a multiple value-based contracts, then Salient is able to show you your in and out-of-network provider designation that is specific to the payer. And many value-based organizations will receive assignable patients, not just those that are attributed. The assignable population may help in growing your attribution and the size of the organization. Salient has developed proprietary logic that helps you identify how likely that beneficiary is to become attributed to you. So now we're going to take a look at the Salient tech stack that allows us to bring in all of the disparate data sources. I'm going to try to simplify this as best as I can. What you're going to see here is that we bring in claims data, the NPES registry, clinical data, and different payers, which are all part of the data ingestion phase. Again, we can bring in as many as you want, but for the sake of slide space, we only used one Medicare Advantage as a placeholder and as an example. And remember, this data comes in via diverse formats and at different times. Then, Salient validates the data for accuracy and quality so that any data conflicts are eliminated. It then goes through the extract, transfer, and load process. And then there is a staging database where Salient provides all of the data enrichments. And that's for the templating and normalizing phases. And at this time, Salient takes the data from the database and organizes it using the Medicare ACO data as the example. It's after that where we identify those missing data fields that I had mentioned. And then once the template is complete, that's where the last ETL process is, where that information then gets housed in the Salient data mart. It then becomes the lifeblood of both SIM and dashboards, the two different interfaces that we have. It really takes a lot of work on the part of our tech team to make this happen, and just imagine trying to do this all by yourself. Salient keeps on top of what data is being fed in and when, and then we make sure it's available for you in an easy to read format. So I'm going to pass it back to Ryan so he can demonstrate how all of these features work together in the Salient solution.
All right. Thank you, Maria. And now the Salient Healthcare platform is predicated on continuous process improvement. So since I'm kind of a CPI junkie, I just wanted to show this quick diagram, and it shows just what we are looking to accomplish. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change my screen over, and you should now be looking at the Salient Healthcare dashboards for this part of the presentation. The purposes of this is to show how Salient can help manage all these data sources, since talking about it really is not the same as actually showing you. I want to preface this portion of the webinar by saying that this data is from a demo set, so there's no PHI being revealed at any time. Now, the first page that you're looking at here, this is literally the first page that all of our clients see when logging into the dashboards. This is our landing page, and you can see along the top that there's MSSP data along with a Humana and a United Healthcare Medicare Advantage data available in this demo set. Now, we use those two MA contracts just for the sake of providing an example, but we have the capability to bring in any payer you choose, whether it be MA, commercial, Medicaid, Medicare. And Maria mentioned the different KPIs earlier. So you can see here you have your benchmark. Looks like it logged me out just because of inactivity while we were doing the presentation, and that is part of our security features. But I'm going to go ahead and log back in real quick, and you're going to be able to see your benchmark, and then you should also be able to see the other widgets here, including your spend to ensure that you're under the benchmark. You also have your population, so you can see if you are increasing or decreasing in the number of beneficiaries. You've got your risk score, and you also have your annual wellness visit percentage, which we mentioned earlier was a proxy for quality. You're also going to see those red and green highlights. Those are directive and designed to tell you if you're trending in a desired or an undesired direction. In this case, you're not seeing any yellow highlights, but if there were, it would represent little or no change. You also have toward the bottom some MA trends available, and that's going to show you MA net revenue over time. Now, since we are limited on time, I'm going to go ahead and use the navigation bars there that are categorized for those 5 KPIs mentioned earlier. I'm going to jump over to the ACO scorecard, and that is listed under our financial category. And once that opens up, you're going to see 8 widgets that present all of the KPIs as percent changes. And that's so that you can see how your organization is trending between 2 different time frames. It's basically an organizational report card. In this case, you can also evaluate, again, your MSSP data, which is labeled here as ACO, and you can compare that to some Medicare Advantage populations to get a more accurate comparison. Since we are bringing in multiple data sets, you really want to get a good idea of what's going on across your organization, your practices, and your providers, and those populations. And I can do so by changing the way that I'm looking at my data. All of this is by percent change, but if I wanted to, I could compare all of my practices, I could expand, and I could show them in a tabular format. And we also have the ability to filter out by practice, by provider, by payer, and by chronic condition if you so wanted. So I have those series of filters. Okay. At this point, I think you've heard enough of Maria and I talking about what we do. So what I'm going to do now is get into our use cases. I'm going to hand things off to Lacey Waddles. As previously mentioned, she is the Population Health Informatics Analyst for the Rocky Mountain Accountable Health Network over in Billings, Montana. Lacey.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for inviting me to present our use case. A little bit of background on Rocky Mountain Accountable Health Network. We were formed in 2013 specifically to contract with CMS and participate in the Medicare Shared Savings Program. Our ACO is based in Yellowstone County, which is the largest county in Montana, and we have approximately 9,000 attributed lives. The majority of our beneficiary lives are attributed to the SCL Health Medical Group, or St. Vincent Healthcare here in Billings, which is comprised of 15 primary care clinics in the surrounding area and in Billings. We also have 12 other participating practices from a variety of specialties who participate in our ACO. So Montana has many challenges geographically as well as financially when you look at how to increase quality while still trying to decrease our costs. We have a relatively low cost of care compared to other ACOs and the national fee-for-service costs that we receive in our reporting packs from CMS. So while we're running lean or think we're running lean, we still weren't able to hit our target costs after completing our first contract period and then entering into our second contract period with CMS. So essentially, we needed to dig deeper and find sources of cost containment. And at that point, when we were transitioning from our first contract period into our second, we hadn't implemented any tools to help us other than some manual reporting that we were doing out of Epic. So why in the world would we decide to engage in multiple contracts? About the same time that we started the MSSP path, we also contracted with Humana for a Medicare Advantage plan that included shared savings opportunities and quarterly quality bonus potentials. Both the MSSP plan and the Medicare Advantage plan were upside risk only, so we really had nothing to lose. Also, when we started the Humana Medicare Advantage contract, it started with a relatively low volume of patients, which was 500. And over the last 5 years, it has exploded, and we now have 5,000 covered lives in less than 5 years with the Humana contract. So they have really picked up a lot of new beneficiaries in the Montana market. So as the number of lives grew, it became very clear to us that we needed a platform to support both of these contract initiatives if we were going to be successful. So why did we choose Salient? Since we were without a data solution for the first several years of our MSSP contract, we knew the manual reports we were using were not going to produce any success. As we searched for our data platform solution, we found that Salient solution met our needs for the MSSP, which was our focus at the time. It was super easy to implement, and it provided us with the level of data that we needed to get to in order to understand where our cost drivers were really coming from. One of the things that I personally appreciate about the Salient platform is that they don't have a black box of data. They're very transparent about the data and any calculations that their platform produces. So as a data analyst, I always want to know the details behind calculations and behind how different things are grouped together. And a lot of companies that we did demos with were not allowing us access to that information, as they said it was proprietary. So we moved forward with Salient, and we implemented the dashboard tool for our MSSP population towards the end of 2018. And then in 2019, we really got into the tool. We also decided to try the Salient Interactive Miner, which is the SIM tool, to really drill into the details of the data that we had. And in 2019, we had a shared savings rate of 2%. It was not enough for shared savings, but it was a vast improvement from our years prior. We also had an overall quality score of 95.69%. So we were very happy with our first year of the results. And as we moved forward, we decided that with that success that we saw with the Medicare Shared Savings Program, we also wanted to move the Humana Medicare Advantage program over to the Salient tool in hopes of also enjoying increased shared savings with them and quality improvement as well. At this point, some of the initiatives that we're currently working on and using the tool for are attribution, annual wellness visits, leakage, and risk adjustments, which are some of the topics that Ryan and Maria had talked about. We're also really looking at post-acute costs for both the ACO and Humana. One of the things that we have found, just looking at the data, is understanding the difference in cost for a traditional skilled nursing facility versus a skilled nursing or swing bed in a critical access hospital. Since Montana is very rural, a lot of times we will have patients that come to Billings for their emergent cares and hospitalizations, but when it comes time to transition them to a skilled nursing setting, they would like to go back to their rural setting and utilize a swing bed. And it is a drastic cost difference to put someone in a swing bed versus a skilled nursing facility. So we're trying to get ahead of that and figure out the best way to partner with some of these facilities to contain those costs a little more while still having the patient remain as close to home as possible. One of the other things that we're focusing on is providing our participating providers in both of the MSSP and Humana Medicare Advantage programs with consistent reporting on the cost of care for their attributed lives. So because we have providers that participate in one or the other and some that participate in both programs, we are able to now deliver reports that are consistent, concise, and something they can rely on every month. The other thing is just having that data in one tool for both of these payers is making it much easier to monitor and manage our performance across both of the payer platforms. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Ryan.
And thank you so much, Lacey, for participating with us today. Honestly, we really enjoy working with you and the team over at Rocky Mountain Accountable Health Network, and we're honestly really glad that we've been able to help you guys, and thank you for being on this presentation. So now our next case study comes from Dan Bailey. He's the Vice President of Payer Contracting and Finance for ProHealth Solutions ACO. And while he wasn't able to be here live, we've asked him to talk about how he actually uses these data visualizations and cross-cutting metrics to ensure that patients are receiving consistent treatment and care over in Wisconsin. What I'm going to do is read each question, and then Maria is going to step in and give the answers that Dan provided. So we're going to start with our first question, which was targeted at ProHealth Solutions ACO's background.
ProHealth Solutions is located in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It was formed in 2010 as a joint venture between ProHealthcare, a community healthcare-based healthcare organization, and the Waukesha Elmbrook Healthcare, a physician-led IPA. It was originally formed in order to participate in various value-based contracts with commercial and governmental payers. PHS started in the Medicare Shared Savings Program, otherwise known as MSSP, in July of 2012 and moved to the Next Generation ACO model in 2017. PHS manages over 96,000 attributed lives in various value-based contracts, including 16,000 in the Next Gen ACO model. PHS has earned shared savings in each year of the Next Gen model.
Now, why did ProHealth Solutions decide to engage in multiple contracts?
PHS has engaged with Salient Healthcare for several years. We started with the data from our next-gen MSSP model and found the information very valuable in identifying key drivers and trends in performance. It has allowed us to identify focus areas for our operational teams to drive continued process performance improvement. After finding value in the use of the tool for the CMS lives, we decided to move forward with the addition of 2 other Medicare Advantage payers. Since payers typically have disparate data sets, Salient has allowed us to bring in the data into a consistent data format. The additional payer data now allows us to compare and contrast trends across multiple payers and a large number of lives.
And what initiatives are you currently working on?
We've been able to use Salient Interactive Miner to create a proprietary population health dashboard. This dashboard allows us to report and analyze performance for 15 key financial, operational utilization, and leakage metrics, both in an all payer and specific payer view. We're reviewing the Salient dashboard tool to better identify potential areas of opportunity for our operational teams in risk coding and managing high cost cases, to name a few.
And finally, how has the Salient solution made it easier for you to manage your performance?
With the addition of the additional payers, we now have a view of over 90% of our at-risk Medicare Advantage lives. Previous to the implementation of Salient, we were literally flying blind, mainly relying on high-level summary performance data provided by CMS and our other contracted payers. The tool now allows us to drill down and identify key drivers of performance and potential areas of opportunity. Without this tool, we would not have felt comfortable moving from shared savings to shared or full risk arrangements. This has then in turn allowed us to increase financial returns on these contracts.
Okay, and again, special thank you to Dan Bailey for providing those answers for us. We'd have loved to have him here on this call with us, but the timing just didn't work out. At this point, I think it's your turn to ask the questions. So what I'm going to do is we'll open the floor for some Q&A, If you have a question for a specific person, just let us know. Otherwise, we'll assume it's for the general group. And Garrett from ACO Exhibit Hall is going to read off all of the questions. Garrett.
All right, great. And thanks, guys, and wonderful presentation. This was very informative. We do have some questions that came in, so in no particular order, and these are directed at different individuals, so I'll just go ahead and begin. Ryan, this first one's for Ryan. In bringing up, bringing in all that claims data from different payers is great, but don't you need EMR data to complete the picture?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that's up to each individual ACO or CIN, but the answer is not really. So when you're implementing initiatives to drive change, it's more often the trends that you want to look at. Trends are generally going to look back at where you were so that you can get in front of where you're headed. For example, if you're looking at SNF data, your EMR data is not going to change drastically in a short period of time, and your trend's still going to hold. So the idea would be to look at the actual SNFs themselves and look at how they're caring for your patients, whether they're keeping your beneficiaries too long, whether they're providing appropriate care. You don't need the EMR for that. When you bring in EMR data, it is more real time. However, you're also looking at unadjudicated claims data, and that means that the information you're looking at has the propensity to change after it's been processed.
Great. This next question I'm going to ask to Maria. What if I want to do an analysis that is not part of the pre-build dashboards?
Yeah, so Salient actually has two interfaces, the Salient Healthcare Dashboards, which is what Ryan went through today, and also Salient Interactive Miner. This allows the user to be able to do ad hoc analysis without any coding experience. And it's really all point and click so that your data analyst can certainly look at and then dig into all of that payer data in a single system, and they don't need to have any coding experience. So yeah, we have two platforms.
Oh, great. Very good. Next question, and I guess I'll send this one back over to Ryan, is how often is the data uploaded?
Great. Thanks, Garrett. So short question, but it's actually kind of a two-parter, right? So how often does data come from the different payers, and then how often does Salient do data loads is really those two parts. So first, CMS has its monthly data load, which they're not great at setting an exact time. We just know it's usually going to arrive around the last week of each month. And then you've got quarterly attribution files, which we know are usually going to arrive within 2 months of the next quarter starting. It'd be nice if these feeds would come in like a train schedule in Tokyo, but honestly, it acts more like a taxi cab system in Greece, where they tell you they'll be back in 15 minutes and then they show up in an hour. And I know that because my wife and I went to Greece on our honeymoon, and that's exactly what happened. The Medicare Advantage and commercial data feeds have their own schedules too. So what we do at Salient is each client gets their data uploaded by the 5th business day of each month, and then that way it keeps everything consistent, timely, and updated.
Okay, yes, that was a very thorough answer. Short question, but thorough answer. And a follow-up question to that is, how does Salient receive all of this data?
So I'll take that one. That's actually a really good question because there's multiple ways in which we can bring in all of the data. The first is the organization provides us the data themselves. That means that they would log into the different payer systems, download the data, and then send it to us via SFTP. It's certainly more cumbersome, and speed is affected depending on how efficient the organization is in getting that data to us. The optimal way to get the data is that the organization allows Salient to act as a proxy, whereby we're going to receive the data from the payer directly. This reduces the amount of work that our client needs to do, and Salient is able to immediately access that data and get it loaded into the Salient solution.
Okay, awesome. A couple last questions that came in, and I think we'll probably be out of time at that point. is how long does a Salient implementation take if there are at least 6 payer data sets involved?
So I'll take that one. So if we're familiar with the contract, for example, the Medicare ACO data, we actually offer a 45-day risk-free trial for you. So we'll get that up and running. You can start using the system within that 45-day period. And then we'll shortly thereafter start working on bringing in the other payer data. If we're familiar with that payer's data, it could take anywhere from about 6 weeks. And if we are not familiar with that payer, then it'll take about 8 to 10 weeks to get them up and running.
Right. And then the last question, and then we'll go ahead and call it for the day, is how do you incorporate predictive AI into your patient-specific data provided at the physician level?
So right now we don't have any specific AI that's incorporated in. It's all about your historical performance and doing better than you did in the previous year. Obviously, with risk scores, you can identify how sick that patient population is and then manage your performance based on that.
All right, great. Well, that is all the time we have for questions today. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But as we conclude, I wanted to encourage all of you to visit the Salient Healthcare exhibit booth at acoexhibithall.com. You can see it here on the slide. And this is where you can learn more about them and connect with their team. There's a lot of cool resources here. And also, if you wanted to reference the recording later, this webinar recording, it will be archived in the library, in the reference library there, so you can get it there. And then lastly, if you have any specific questions for any of our panelists or the Salient team that we weren't able to get to today, their contact information is here on the slide, so feel free to take a note or make note of that and to contact them directly if you would like, and they'll be happy to follow up with you for further discussion. So thank you all for attending. This is a great presentation. I hope you found it very informative and helpful, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming.